It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, June 23rd, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is seeing those pre draft trade rumors heat up.
Yeah, lots of talk.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade, and I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. To keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, and of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, Rick Tocchet has added to the assistant coach stable for the Flyers, and I wasn't sure they were going to do that, to be honest. So I think it's good in some ways to add more voices and more experience to the pool here. So Todd Reirden, I think, is the more interesting of the two for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. I mean, the other guy for video coach, it's Mark Crawford's son. Like, I don't know what his skills are, but he's Mark Crawford's son. So we have to mention that, right? We just do.
Right. But and he also worked with Rick Tocchet in Vancouver. So
It's Vancouver,
that.
Mark Crawford. Like, we've just figured, right? Yeah.
Right. So I think obviously that is less significant, and the Flyers video coaching crew has been consistently excellent. So
Yes.
adding another person to the team, why not? No issue with that. But I do think Todd Reirden is the more interesting hire, simply because he has such high level experience, and to be an assistant coach, considering his experience, I think is a good thing, because you have a very hungry person in Todd Reirden in a lot of ways, because he's seen kind of the mountaintop before with the Caps, but has a lot of experience with the Pens as well.
Yeah, I look at Todd Reirden and I don't look at him as a future NHL coach at all. And so I don't think fans should either. That's my advice, because when you watched him as a Capitals coach, he was completely different than when he was an assistant. He just couldn't do it. And sometimes that happens. And so can he teach defense? Yes. But again, from my experience, I think I'm gonna have to have a wait and see on this one, because I don't think I know he could be effective, but I also think that he could be a guy that maybe wears on you too. So I want to see how that sort of works out.
Yeah, I think if he were the only main assistant coach, I would worry a lot more. But given that he's part of a group, I'm a little bit less concerned about that particular issue. But we'll see where he can contribute. Now, he did cover the power play and defense with the Pens when he was with them, but he's supposedly being brought on as an all-around situation kind of coach, which also don't love that in a lot of ways. I would like the assistant coaches to have specific assignments.
I think they eventually will, and maybe that just buys them time. The Penguins power play was okay. It was 6th in the league. That's, considering the guys they had, that's good. But they had those guys. So I can't give Todd Reirden all that credit when you have Sidney Crosby on there. And so it's like, I don't know. I don't know if he's like going to do anything with the power play, to be honest. I'm not sure.
Right. We just don't know. So we'll see how this coaching group comes together. Obviously, we won't really get a sense of that at all until training camp in the fall. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this coaching group operates moving into next season. We're talking about some of the other kind of outstanding items for the Flyers. I think, given the fact that, we got like the Noah Cates contract dealt with and such, the fact that there's no Cam York contract still is like, it wasn't worrying me until maybe mid last week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's getting dangled out there. Like, that's why. Because there's no reason for the Flyers to set his price if some other team's going to do it. So I think he's not going to sign for a while. I think they are trying to actively trade him. I understand why they would. So I think that's a reality.
Yeah, and of course, they signed the Tyson Forster contract as well, and they're kind of in that same cohort, so to speak. So I do think it's interesting because you look at the pros and cons of trading somebody or attempting to trade somebody before there's the value attached, and we've talked about that.
Mhm.
That in most of these cases, it behooves the trading team to sign them so that receiving teams know what they're paying up front.
Right.
But if they can't figure that out now, that makes him harder to trade, right?
Sure. But not that much harder. I mean, there is a finite thing. They know how many years he has until free agency, and they know
Mhm.
he is going to sign because he doesn't have a choice. So it's
Well,
just
that's
about the
also
number.
true.
So
Yeah.
I don't think it makes it that hard.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting leading up to the draft in particular, because if you're making a trade at the draft that involves sending pieces the other way to perhaps move up in the draft, or if there's some sort of scenario like that, I think having that value would be helpful. It's not a requirement, like you said, but I think that value would be helpful. So we'll see if it gets done before the draft.
Yeah, I mean the downside of this is John Tortorella hurt his trade value because
Yeah.
Cam York used to be looked at as an offensive defenseman, and he has no offensive numbers. That hurts.
Yeah. Now, it's very obviously much less concerned about no Jacob Peltier contract
No, I mean that's an
yet
easy
either.
one. That's an easy one.
Right. Well, and that's why it's still top of mind to me in some ways, because it is on paper such an easy deal to make. Why isn't it done yet?
Because you squeak that one in when you have an idea of what you've done in free agency or whatever. And no offense to Jacob Peltier, but you'll get what's left.
Right. I mean, that is fair. I just think it is interesting because you could just put a low dollar on it and get it done, but there is something to be said for holding off and
Yep.
squeaking it in, like you
Yes.
said. But I also think that this is related to some of the trade rumors, but we'll get to that. I do want to just note that the buyout period has started.
Yeah.
And we have talked about that it's unlikely that the Flyers use a buyout in
Briere
this
doesn't seem
year.
to have an appetite for it.
No, and we had talked about the only real potential candidate here is Nick Delorier, that would save $1 million this year
Right.
and cost $500K next year, which is virtually
Nothing.
nothing. So it would be no big deal, and you do it to get the roster spot if you're making some
Correct.
other deal that you feel like you need the
Right.
forward spot. But very unlikely to happen unless there's some crazy circumstance.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
that.
they may be in a situation where they need to come up with an extra million, and if they do, then that will happen. If not, then they probably won't.
Yeah. So I don't know. Should be a fun week leading up to the NHL draft that starts this Friday. And, we've got 5 days left for the Flyers to make any of these trades here. Now, when we're talking about some of these trade rumors around the Flyers, I think that it is important to remember what Danny Briere has said consistently through this offseason, that they are interested in trades, they're making phone calls, they're considering things, but they're not going to do anything crazy that's going to involve a huge overpay. It seems that in this current trade market and where the Flyers are, there's literally nobody out there that's worth overpaying for, that the
No.
Flyers have a shot at, right?
Yeah, I agree. I don't expect something like that. So, example, Marco Rossi. Once he put
Mhm.
an $8 million price tag on himself, and
Nope.
they probably want to do a sign and trade like an 8x8. They're not going to do it.
No. No, and then that's kind of like Marco Rossi would be amazing to have
Sure.
on the Flyers, but is this Flyers organization the team that's going to make that deal? No.
Nope.
Can they? No. So I don't think that it's fair to be unrealistic in terms of expectations for what the Flyers will and will not do, especially, like I said, given that Danny Briere has done such a good job laying the groundwork for those expectations.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, there are some rumors out there, however, given all of that, especially around the Buffalo Sabres. We are going to dig into those options and the pros and cons coming up next. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, and each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you feel full longer. And personally, I go for the no shells variety. As we know, I am lazy, do not want to do the job of shelling. So the no shells make it easy to make it a grab and go snack for my busy days. Plus, I can have them at my desk while I'm working. And I have a huge supply of the sea salt and vinegar no shells variety waiting for me anytime I want them. They're so delicious and a healthy option too. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. These little green wonders pack a protein punch. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. On tomorrow's show, we are going to do our final prospect profiles of the top tier prospects heading into this week's NHL draft. We're going to look at some first rounders we haven't covered yet, or at least 2 of them. Plus a wild card option that people are talking about. So we're going to get into a center, Jack Nesbitt of Windsor. This is probably like a 22 or 31 option there. And Bill Zonin, who's a winger in the queue, who's an intriguing option as well. Plus, we're going to talk about that wild card in Mason West, who's actually a football player. But we will get into all of that.
Yep.
Plus, we will answer your mailbag questions on the Wednesday show as per usual. So get those in. You can email us at lockdownflyers@gmail.com, send us a message on any of our socials, or comment on our YouTube channel. All right, Russ. So the Sabres seem to be open for business here, and they have cap issues and dealing with all of their RFAs and going this year and next year. There's so much going on with that team and trying to manage their roster. And so the conversation around Bowen Byram is still out there, and he's been a trade bait guy. What seems like since the Sabres finished their season against, he has a 4.62 qualifying offer. So, he's not a cheap defenseman per se, but he's not expensive either. He's been on the top pairing, but in Buffalo. So you got to put a little bit of an asterisk there. Not too much, but a little bit of an asterisk there. But has anything changed with how the Sabres are approaching things, do you think?
No, I mean, Byram wants to be a number 1 defenseman. Owen Power's blocking him. So he would like to go. I think if the Flyers got him, they would have to let Sanheim be the number 1 until Byram can prove maybe he could do it. He might be able to do it, but I don't think he's got a super high offensive number that's going to sit with him. I think, 50 points is probably around where he's going to sit. So it's going to be similar to Sanheim, but if you made them a top pairing, it would be formidable. He's a really good player, really good skater. I like him, but there's a number. It's like anything else. You could supersede the number with him, like we talked about with K'Andre Miller. Like, these guys are good, but there's a number I won't go past for these kinds of guys because they're not the great. They're good. They
right. And to me, that's 5.5, right?
Yeah,
or
right
thereabouts.
Now. Yeah, right now thereabouts 5.5, 5.75, fine.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where I'm at as well with him. Now, the twist in this conversation is that since the initial conversations about Byram have started, word is on the street that they're willing to and interested in potentially trading JJ Peterka, who is a forward that I love. I've loved him since, his World Junior days. But I think he has struggled to find a place, especially being mired in Sabres land.
Yeah, I just think this is his agent, Alan Walsh, trying to get him out of town. But the Sabres don't have to trade him, and I don't think they're going to.
No.
There's no reason that they have to. They could sign him to his next deal, and if that's his last deal as a Sabre, so be it, if they don't get better. But I think this is just an agent kind of getting the word out there that, his client would like to go elsewhere, but he's not in a position where he's in the driver's seat. So I don't think he's going to get traded.
Yeah, it's interesting because by putting that word out, it creates the friction that sometimes forces the team's hand.
I think it was already there. Like, to be fair, I think that friction was already there, and it got to the point where now he's just putting the word out.
Like, I always find it interesting when that happens, like, and who wins that game of chicken, right? In terms of trying to force a
Well,
trade.
I mean, there's a long list of guys who have won that game against the Sabres: Sam Reinhart, Jack Eichel. There's a long list. So
might as well go for it, I
there's
guess,
a
right?
roadmap. There's a roadmap for it.
Yeah, I think so. Now, the only reason why that makes it a little interesting on the Flyer side is that it creates a potential package deal situation, right? With Byram
Yeah.
and Peterka, where you could potentially send an Owen Tippett, let's say, in the other direction. Now, I know trading Owen Tippett has its own baggage in terms of the salary and, output this past year wasn't that great, so it's not trading high, but I do think that it's worth the Flyers having that conversation with the Sabres.
Yeah, I think Tippett, the thing is, the Sabres don't want any draft picks. They don't need draft picks.
Right.
And I think they need better players than Tippett even.
Yeah.
So if you're trading Tippett, then you're going to have to trade something else that you don't want to trade. They might ask for Jet Luchenko. They might ask for, like, this is what they're interested in, or things like that. They're not interested in picks. Picks don't excite them right now.
Right. And that goes back to our earlier point that Danny Briere has emphasized over and over again. They're not going to overpay. And so they're not going to send a crazy good player or a Jet Luchenko, because Jet Luchenko, to them, like, they have their eggs in the Jet Luchenko
But
basket.
somebody might,
right?
They'll ask for Oliver Bonk. That's the next guy on the list. That's how they're going to play that game.
Right. And so that's why I don't necessarily see like a giant package deal happening here. Now, something individual for Byram, I think, is a possibility, and they should absolutely pursue it. Now, there's additional rumors out there about Alexander Romanoff from the Islanders. And to me, that's the second choice if you can't get Byram, right? Because similar age, similar size, they're both left-handed defensemen. They're both have been on the top pairing of their existing team, but maybe languishing a little bit in some ways. And so there's some similarities in the situation, but Romanoff is not as good as Byram for sure. But you wouldn't have to pay him as much either. So there's that.
Right.
Where do you see that?
I don't think that's happening either, because I think the problem with the Island is they're just deciding if they're going to give Noah Dobson the 11 he's asking for. And if they don't give him the 11 he's asking for, he's getting traded. So, and I would take Noah Dobson at 10 all day. 11 is sort of like where I get to the point where it's like, okay, that may be a bridge too far, 11 by 8 sign and trade kind of thing. So I think they're not going to trade Romanoff, because the likelihood is if they can't come to terms with Dobson, he's the next guy traded.
Right. Like, they'll need Romanoff if they have to trade Dobson.
Correct.
Like, so I agree with you there. And that's why I was
and they're
very
going to get Schaefer, right?
Those
So that's
rumors.
Right.
So that's, that's there's that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I was skeptical of Romanoff as a possibility, but I do absolutely see why it makes sense to talk about it that way, because of the Byram situation, that there is sort of a pecking order there of these two similar defensemen.
Yeah.
There.
I mean,
and
Byram's
Romanoff,
likely to get traded. Like, that's been out there. I think that's true. And the right deal has to happen. We also could talk about Mattias Samuelsson. His name's out there. Certainly has a lot of, he's just a lot of history with the Flyers, with his dad and everything. And I like him. I just know, I think his injuries have been the way he plays, not because of him being like fragile or anything. He plays a high physical game, but I think it's also worthy to note that Rasmus Dahlin played his best when Samuelsson was playing with him healthy. So, if the Flyers got him and the price was decent enough, like if you had to trade 2 seconds for him, fine, I'd do it, because he's a young guy still. I'll roll the dice on the injuries. I'll ask him to dial it back instead of 10, maybe play at 9.5 and be a little smarter. And that could change the Flyers blue line, because then you're getting a guy who plays heavy hockey, who could skate and, really be a great complement to an offensive defenseman. And so I think I would consider that.
Yeah, I like Mattias Samuelsson a lot. I do waver sometimes on the quote unquote player who comes home
Hmm.
because I think that in some instances it creates too much pressure
Hmm.
and
That's
it
true.
it just
And in
overwhelming and
hockey,
they
I don't see it as much. I see it in other sports more.
yeah, but we do see it in
Sure,
hockey
it happens.
sometimes.
It
So,
happens.
I feel like it could motivate him and could force him in some ways to play the more structured game and to not cross the line that causes the injuries to your point. But I just sometimes it can create so much pressure because it's kind of your hometown crowd and obviously with
Yeah.
his dad and the family history, there's a lot of pressure that comes with a guy like him playing for the Flyers for
But he
sure.
also understands the area, the familiarity with it. Like there's no transition either. So he comes over, there's no getting used to the place. He knows the place. So there's
Yeah.
that. That's an advantage.
Yeah, no, there absolutely is. There's pros and cons to that for sure, but I think of all of these, that is the most intriguing option to me. Now,
Yeah,
from a straight up hockey perspective, Byram,
of
if their
course.
Flyers are going to make any trades, Byram is the guy I want. But with all that being said, there will be, of course, more talk about all this over the next 5 days as we lead up to the draft and beyond that for sure. In the meantime, it is Monday, so we will have a new poll question plus our nemesis of the week coming up next.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. I would bet Josh Hader as the American League Cy Young, even though he's a relief pitcher. They don't win it a lot, so you might be able to get some odds. New to FanDuel, new customers can get bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
It is Monday, so we will have a new off-season poll for y'all, as well as our nemesis of the week. I do want to touch on the fact that Jonathan Taves is back in hockey. Like,
Yeah.
it's been talked about, especially over the
Oh, yeah.
last several months, and especially with him being from Winnipeg, it
No
seemed
surprise.
likely that that's where he would go. Although there was some talk about him maybe going to the Avalanche, but it was going to be Winnipeg or nothing
Yes.
at this point. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if he can still play because getting
Yeah.
back into the rigors of the game is going to be tough for him.
It's hard. He's not the oldest guy, but he's been away a couple of years. I looked at other
Mhm.
guys, like I covered an older Mark Messier, and he certainly was older, but he wasn't away from the game either. And
Right.
Taves was never the fastest skater. I still think you can get 50 points out of him with good faceoffs, but I think he's a 3C, and if they try and jam him into
Oh,
2C
totally.
because Adam Lowry's hurt, that's where they could run into trouble with Jonathan Taves.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I knew a long time ago. I interviewed him post draft, uh, right when he was a young player for a Winnipeg magazine. So I found out his love for Winnipeg very early on, and that's never waned. I mean, he loves
Yeah.
Chicago, but he definitely always wanted to play there. So that was going to happen. And yeah, I think it'll be a good story. And it's good for Winnipeg because they kind of need that
They
kind of
need it.
player. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what he's got.
Yeah. Oh, and he is 100% a 3C on that team, and
Yes.
they're deluding themselves if they try to do otherwise, other
Yes.
than in some random situations. But like, come on, let's be real about it at this point in this age. Going into our off-season poll question of the week, of course, it is draft week, and we've been talking a little bit about the decentralization of the draft and how that's going to work. Danny Briere mentioned it at his pre-draft presser a little bit. So we're curious what you think the
Hmm.
effect of that will be on the draft. So how do you think the decentralized draft will affect how the draft plays out the most? All of these are effects, but which do you think will be the biggest effect? Your options are it won't feel any different than in the past. It'll feel disconnected and less personal than in the past. There will be fewer trades, and there will be delays in picks and the timing of the whole thing. So it'll just technically kind of go off the rails a little bit there
Right.
with that last option. So we'll put that poll, the link of it, in the show notes. It'll be on our YouTube channel. Make sure you give us your opinion, put why you gave the answer you did in the comments, and we will discuss it on the Friday show in our final pre-draft preview. Excited to do that. Turning to our nemesis of the week. Last week, I talked about second guessing the Flyers and the draft strategy, and I already started doing it. So maybe it was a self-fulfilling prophecy for me. But I think, given kind of the jockeying for position and who the top 5 picks, like the prognosticators think they'll be, like who will actually be available to the Flyers at 6, is a little bit stressful, and I'm second guessing some of those things, but we'll get there. And there's only 5 days left, so I can only do that for so long, which is the good news about that situation, is that it will end very quickly. Russ, you talked about the NFL salary cap, or kind of the fact that there is one, but there isn't really one because the NFL dollars are so out of control in the first place. You compared it to baseball and hockey a little bit there. And so that was an interesting discussion we had on last week's show. If you haven't heard it, go back and take a listen. Now, for this week, I have 2 nemesis, but one of them is definitely Flyers related. And I think that there's a lot of quote unquote PTSD that we have in Flyers land about the draft and making what we see as incorrect choices at the time. And I would say that in a lot of cases, we were correct to be upset about the picks at the time, and things did not pan out. I think the Flyers have had some unexciting picks over the past, 5 to 7 years that turned out to be good players, but just not exciting players.
Sure.
I think we're all going to be traumatized for eternity about not picking Cole Caulfield, and we've talked about that on this show. And so I think just the nemesis is trying not to keep that energy going this week. I want to have the positive energy going this week, and that this team is going to have the right approach, and with the volume of picks they have, we're going to have some really positive results. Now, is it going to be the most exciting player? No, because they're at 6. That's just a fact, right?
Yep.
So they're going to get a good player, but not the most exciting player, because you can't do that at 6. It doesn't matter who you are. You just, like 99 times out of 100, you're not going to be able to do that at 6. So I would like to stay positive about how the Flyers are going to do at the draft.
I would say definitely stay positive. I am going to talk about outdoor summer concerts in the sense that I really don't purchase those tickets anymore for a variety of reasons. But the biggest one is, like, one time at Great Adventure, a band that I was seeing, there was double bill. The first band played, no problem. The second band, who I really wanted to see more, played. It starts thundering and lightning. So they play, like, one song, they go back in, they're like, yeah, we'll be back. They come back, they play like 2 more songs, and they're like, you know what, our insurance company won't allow us to play because there's lightning on the horizon. Sorry, see ya. And you don't get any refund. That's it. You saw half a concert and you're done. And then there's other times where you just get drenched. Like, they could play through, there's no thunder or lightning, but you get drenched. And even when I was younger, you kind of get rigor mortis at the end. Like, you're having a good time, but then it's like afterwards, you don't feel great. And so, like, I'm pretty much done with it. I think, unfortunately, with the pitfalls of it, the chances of getting a nice summer day, I think it's only 50-50 with the way the weather is these days. So it's like, I can't put big money up for that. Now, if you go to one of the festivals, they're going to play regardless. But yeah, you might just get drenched and muddy and whatever. And that's, if you're staying at a hotel, maybe you're going to do it. But if you're staying at, like, camping, no way. So right now, I'm pretty much out of that business unless it's indoors or it's, like, fully covered. Like, I'm fully covered too.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are some artists that thrive on rain shows, and obviously they want them to be rare, but when they get them, it's just an otherworldly experience. And I know, like, Taylor Swift rain shows, I hear, are phenomenal. I have been to rain shows of other artists. that I've loved, and it's been fun. And of course, like, you cannot talk about rain shows and the history of rain shows without talking about Diana Ross in Central Park. Just one of the most phenomenal things to have ever happened in the Central Park concert series history. So I think, there's pros and cons to it. I think with the right artist, it can be an absolutely phenomenal experience. But I think just from a practical sense, no, of course you don't want it to rain when you go to a summer concert.
Right.
So I think it really does depend on the artist, and it's good that we have good weather tracking so you can figure out and you can prepare appropriately. I am always one to bring an emergency poncho in these situations, and
Sure.
it's
And even
helped
with
me
a
out.
poncho, though, you could still be miserable.
Oh, sure. But again, I think it depends on the artist and how
Yeah.
much you love them and how
Yeah.
much they thrive in the rain environment.
I think that's fair
So
too.
you got to take all that
Because a
into
couple of years ago, I went to
consideration.
one and we had the rain delay, and we got through the show, and it wasn't terrible. But then I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm doing this again.
Yeah, I get it. Well, summer related, my side nemesis is turning on the air conditioning or not. And we're in a heat wave at the
You have
moment.
to
And
now.
you have to now, but it's like living where I live and the utility bills, it's a
Oh, yeah.
struggle every day
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
decide if I'm going to
What
actually
temperature, when
turn
I'm
on
turning it on. No, I get it.
yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So without central air, it's cost a lot of money to run
Yeah.
those window units.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I do think about it every day. So hopefully it cools off quickly. I hope y'all are staying cool out
It's going to be
there
a few
as
days for sure.
yeah. So good luck with that. That will do it for today's show. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So get those mailbag questions, those last draft questions into any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There's no off season. It brings you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. I'm on the show every Friday. You can find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.